Our first task is to take a look at these two triangles and decide if they are congruent. Now we can see that we have markings of a pair of congruent sides here, a pair of congruent sides here, and a pair of congruent angles here. So that makes me think that we might be able to use the side-angle-side congruence theorem. However, if we take a closer look at both of these triangles, we will see that one of them doesn't have the angle in the proper space. This angle needs to be in between the two sides. So right there, that angle is in between this side and this side. But in this second triangle, the angle that's in between the two sides is right there. So we would need to know that this side is congruent to that side in order to be able to use the side-angle-side congruence theorem. So because this triangle over here on the right is not in the correct order, we cannot use this side-angle-side congruence theorem. Therefore, on this one, we do not have enough information to tell if these are congruent or not. On example number 2, we've got a pair of angles here, and we've got a pair of angles there, and they share a side. So these two triangles have this side in common. If we were to graph them separately, they would look like this, where we'd have this angle is congruent to that angle, this angle is congruent to that angle, and then this side is congruent to that side because they're really the same side. So we can use the angle-side-angle congruence theorem. That side is in between the two angles for both of these triangles. Therefore, these are congruent. And we're going to write that as yes, they are congruent by the angle-side-angle congruence theorem. So this is how we'll word it. On our next example here, we have again two sides, two pairs of sides, and then on this third one, this side again is shared like before, so we've got three pairs of congruent sides. The side-side-side congruence theorem tells us if we have three pairs of congruent sides, then they are congruent. So yes, these are congruent by the side-side-side congruence theorem. Here, this is just given to us. You can see that we have a pair of sides here, a second pair of sides here, and the third pair of sides there. So this one again is yes by the side-side-side congruence theorem, and we don't have to get any additional information. It was just given to us. On this one, we've got a pair of sides here, we've got a pair of sides here, and we can see that we have two intersecting straight lines right here. So we know that this angle and this angle are congruent to each other. Again, that makes me want to use the side-angle-side congruence theorem. But as we can see, like in the first one, the angle has to be between those two sides. And in this triangle over here on the left, that would be this angle right there, would be the one between the two sides. And then over on the triangle on the right, we'd have this angle right there, would be between the two sides. So even though we got this extra information here in the middle, that still is not enough information to tell if these two triangles are congruent. So this one would be not enough information. Our task on this next activity is to prove that we have two congruent triangles. There's lots of information on here. So let's identify what we are trying to show. Triangle VWX would be this one right here, VWX. That's that triangle. And triangle WVZ, WVZ is this one right here. So I'm going to draw a picture of those two separately off to the side. So we've got this one, VWX, VWX, and then we have our second triangle, WVZ, and we have to use one of our theorems to prove that they're congruent. Now I can get some of that information from the markings that are here that come from this information right there. We can see that this and this are congruent, and this are congruent. And so these two congruent markings make up this side. That would be VX right there. And these two make up this edge, which is WZ right there. Those two are congruent because if we take these two sides, which are together congruent to these two sides, and add them up, then we end up with a new set of congruent sides. So we will write because WY is congruent to VY and YX is congruent to YZ, we can add those together to get WZ is congruent to VX. And that's what we've got marked here. Alrighty, so that gives us a little bit of information there. We can also see that the sides on the top and the bottom are congruent to each other because it's marked. So we have this bottom side and this top side. That gives us WX here is congruent to VZ, and that was just given to us. If we had this third pair of sides congruent, then we have the side-side-side congruence theorem. So we can see that they are the exact same side on this picture. So we get WV on this triangle is congruent to WV on this triangle, and that's enough to say by side-side-side congruence theorem, triangle VWX is congruent to triangle WVZ. And that's the conclusion of our proof. On this last question here, we have some parallel lines. We're going to be able to get some information there. And we've got some right angles. That's nice because right angles are going to be congruent to each other. And we're trying to show that these two triangles, NQM right there and MPL right there, are congruent to each other. So let's start getting some information. We need to get enough information for one of our congruence theorems. Up here we're told that M is the midpoint of NL, this right here. If M is the midpoint, it's exactly in the center, then we can conclude from that that NM is congruent to ML because M is the midpoint. So that's our reasoning for that. We have these two angles are congruent. It's given to us because it shows that they're right angles. That's also given to us up in this information here, that those lines are perpendicular to each other. And to get our last piece of information, we're going to go back to parallel lines. These two parallel lines are cut by a transversal. NL is a transversal to parallel lines. And so if I take that picture here, I can see that this angle would be that one right there, and this angle would be that one right there, and they are corresponding angles in this picture for parallel lines, and we know that corresponding angles of parallel lines are congruent to each other. So we now have enough information to use the angle side angle congruence theorem. So we have by angle side angle, we know triangle NQM is congruent to triangle MPL. You need to make sure that you write a description of all of those pieces of information that we got in full sentences. Thank you for watching, and good luck.